Да.
All right, so it seems that we are live. Okay. All right, guys. Well, welcome to this small webinar. So I'm very grateful to Artec guys for inviting me over and just basically sharing what I do and get paid as well. So it's like a very nice combination. But yeah, I'm super excited to share some of the things that I worked on, and it would be good for you to give you some glimpse of what I've been doing behind the stages and stuff like that. And obviously, we have also Mike here from Artec, who will be giving us a little bit more information about some other things that Artec are working on. Hey, Mike, good to see you.
Hello, Jama. Hello, everybody who watching us today and listen us today. Enjoy this small journey trip in 3D and CGI. And our guest, Jama, works for you.
Awesome. Well, we've got a lot to go through. I think, Mike, we should dive in. Otherwise, it will become very long webinar, right? I'm going to share my screen here. Can you guys see it? All good. I think you can see it. All right. Just very two lines about me. My name is Jama Jurabaev. I work as a concept artist at Lucasfilm. And obviously, I've been doing a lot of things as an artist. I design, I paint, I draw, I do a lot of 3D lately, I would say last 10 years. And also I run a company called Big Medium Small. This is primarily where we use 3D scanners. That's why I wanted to give you like a few things that we do in the company using the scanners. Well, we're gonna dive straight into it. I'll show you like a very short, like a few short examples here. So this is like one of the products we created a while ago, and this is basically like what we do as a company. We basically create like 3D assets for artists to use. It's characters, props, environments, and all that kind of stuff. What you're seeing here is basically like one of the main characters that we created for one of our products. And it's interesting, like this one was like a very interesting example, especially for the scanners that we use here. Like the face you see here and the boots were 3D scanned. And basically for the boots, I had to put them on and go to the park, make them dirty, put a lot of mud on top of it so we can get the like proper scan instead of like sculpting on top. And for the face, this is Andre, a friend of ours. And literally we had like 5 minutes to scan the guy, and as you can see, like he ended up being a hero character in one of our products. And then obviously what happens, like I will quickly just recap on like what we do and then where this ends up being in, right? Like, so you've seen the characters, and obviously what we do as a final product, we share those with an artist, with other artists. This is obviously me. I did a few promo images here, and you can see like we can use those characters as a storytelling elements. You know, it could be part of a game or a film. It depends what you're working on. Obviously, in this case, it pretends to be like some sort of a cinematic experience, and you can see some of the elements that were 3D scanned obviously ended up being in this final product. But I wanted to go back. This is where the story starts. I know this is a very interesting image here. So like I knew very little about 3D scanners back in the day when I was starting this, but obviously I watched a few reviews and I was like, oh, it looks pretty interesting. So, and then luckily I had like this amazing people from Europack 3D who were like introduced me to the 3D scanning world. They came over to my place. They did a few demos, and then I kind of like decided to purchase a few scanners for the company. And this were like basically I had a device, but I didn't know how to scan it. I essentially ended up having this turntable. It's basically like a Dyson fan, and it would like rotate like 45 degrees left and right, and that was my kind of like mobile turntable. But obviously, like at some point, I was like, I need a mannequin because obviously I cannot like dress myself up and scan as well. So this is a friend of mine. His name is Bob. So we essentially became very close friends with this guy. But that's how like this is the setup, you know, like nothing fancy because again, this was my home setup. Like I would use Dyson fan for the turntable, and obviously the mannequin who I will undress and dress up, put different stuff on top of it. But essentially what was important, like the other part of it, you know, where like we had an opportunity to kind of put together like different designs, costumes and stuff like that. And slowly you see me here, like I was scanning using a spider scanner. And essentially, obviously we also had a chance to scan because I think like the main part of this conversation is like how mobile the scanners are. Like being a small device, you can travel all around the world and scan people. And this is me like in Ukraine, like at one of the conferences, we had a little corner where we would scan different people. And obviously, there's always someone who would say like, "Oh, what is this?" And this is like a sort of meme someone made with me holding an iron. Essentially, there was a scanner instead of it. And obviously, the whole message was that like, well, why are you using the scanners if you scan with iPhone? And I was like, okay, show us your iPhone scan result. And he sent over this, which I think it's marketable. You can like for a certain type of movies, you can sell this and make it happen. But obviously, you can see like this, the quality that we're getting with, I was getting with the scanners is this. You know, this is like a very good starting point, especially for an artist, for a sculptor, or for a 3D artist. This is like a very decent quality, and it was done like in, let's say, in 5 minutes top. You know, you just put like the person would sit in front of us, we will just get the scan, see the preview, and most of the time you can straight away decide like, oh, this is working, this is not working, and stuff like that. A few more examples just to show you kind of the quality. And again, these were done, each one of this is like 5 minutes, sometimes even faster, right? And then the essential work is done. Obviously, moving from generic scans, like I wanted to show you like something that we use for our products. Like essentially, like you can see, like using the mannequin and just different type of setups, I was able to create a full-size design and all scanned. And you can see on the close-ups, like the quality is pretty impressive. Yeah, like if I scroll in, you can see like even like all the kind of like little logo types and stuff like that. It's very, very cool. And this is the end product. So this, like we did this military sort of project where we did design sort of generic soldiers, because, you know, like in the movie industry or game industry, we use a lot of like soldiers and stuff like that. We felt like it would be nice to kind of design a generic soldier. And this is the final version, right? Like I'll scroll through some of this. Some of the elements here were not 3D scanned, obviously, like some hard surface rifles, all that stuff kind of had to be made up from scratch. So artists actually modeled them, like, but the gloves, like the boots, certain areas of the vest and all those, that kind of stuff. You can see, like, for example, the glove here. Later on, I will show you the kind of the original scan. But obviously, this is almost like a game-ready model, but that's sort of the final look of it. And then we can create tons of soldiers out of the assets. And this is, you can see the lineup here. You know, we're creating all these little props and all those little pouches you see here, the gloves and the knee pads and stuff like that. Originally, they were 3D scanned, and obviously our talented artists then they put extra effort into those. But 3D scans were like a solid starting point for us, which was fantastic. We obviously don't do only like military. It was just one of our products. We also did like some Tokyo-inspired characters, and again, shoes and some of the props were like scanned. And now, again, full circle, you see them in stories, right? Like in this case, I did this promo images, like something probably like inspired by Predator or something like that. So you see a bunch of guys wandering in jungles. Yeah. Quickly scroll through these images. And also, like, this is something we are going to talk about a bit later, which is, like, obviously, I showed you a few examples on, from something I do on a daily basis, which, or we do at Big, Medium, Small, which is like scanning props and characters. But a lot of times, like, these 3D scanners are quite useful in a wide range of things. For instance, here, like, I did a few scans of this fabric just to see, like, because I love sculpting myself, and I was wondering, like, it's almost like getting a reference, you know. Let's say if you're a painter, like, you look at the reference to copy it. In this case, like, I would just scan some sort of coat I would have, or a shirt and stuff like that, and then I could analyze and look at the folds and stuff like that. So even if I'm not using this asset as it is, this gives me a lot of information in terms of how the fabric works and all those things. Or, for instance, like, this is another very interesting, we would scan a lot of like patches, just like put them on a flat surface, some sort of like material or like clothing pattern and stuff like that. And then you can make, for example, 3D brushes out of them. Like, let's say if you're using ZBrush, you can create alphas and stuff like that. And these are quite, I mean, you can create this stuff by from scratch, obviously, or you can like use Marvelous Designer, but this process is way faster, right? Like you can just literally find something that you have and you can scan it and come up with something really cool. Or for example, shoes, like this is actually a bunch of my shoes. I just scanned them. Of course, like for the final products, a lot of times we modify them. We don't use them as it is, but it just gives you a very solid base, where you can just like literally like in 2 minutes get all of those done. I want to show you a few things from the design process as well, because being like quite fast, those scanners allowed us to do a lot of iterations. For instance, this is like some of the new stuff we've been working on, and you can see here like any product is a sort of like is a result of a design process where you get some sort of a feedback or design decisions. Like for instance, you can see like the green areas, like some of the new scans we've done, right? And then the red areas that we are still missing that has to be modeled. So it kind of like quickly gives us ideas of how to prototype things. And you can see also like I will do a few paint overs or attach a few references like, oh, we need this, we need to kind of like have additional helmet or something like this. And then also this is very interesting, like as artists, like you will understand the dilemma here. Like for instance, a lot of like you would say, okay, you scan the realistic like pants or like military outfit, right? What's the artistic sort of take on this? Well, actually there is, because like depending on, because you're like a costume designer, like you're putting the clothes on, and then for instance you see like this is the first iteration we did, which was scanned, and it looks realistic. However, like we all felt it looks too straight, like design wise we felt like we can change the silhouette a little bit better to make it nicer. And you can see like I did a very quick sketch of how ideally we would love to see the rhythm, and the kind of the shapes of the outfit. And essentially, this is where like, because scanning with 3D scanners pretty fast, we can just go back and for instance, in the previous one, this were like the knee pads were too loose, and we were like, oh, let's just like make them less loose, so we're getting these nice shapes. And once you kind of adjust them according to this design, what essentially the fabric will kind of get tightened up, and you will get additional folds and those kind of elements. So essentially, like even if it's simple like material, like simple fabric, you can actually like shape it in a way it looks designed, And I remember I spent tons of time making sure like all the folds here look pleasant, you know what I mean? Like this is where the design part of it comes in, you're using your artistic sort of talent, and then you shaping up the folds and stuff like that. And since like literally like let's say we did one pass of scanning and we realized, oh, it's not exactly right, then we can do another one, because it's essentially like readjusting the fabric and so on. And also trying different ideas, for instance, we would put different elements on, and quickly like mix them up together and see how they look like. And the more of this stuff we scan, the more we have variation and ideas to, again, these are not perfect. Like if you can look very carefully in some areas, you see like pops of different color and stuff like that. But don't forget, this is just design stage where we want to lock the silhouette. And you can see like all these folds here and stuff like that. This was all manually adjusted to make sure they look nice and it works as a character. And then what happens? Once we approve the design, then we obviously go and do the final polish, which means like every individual asset, if needed, has to be separated. You can see the balaclava here was like basically scanned on a person. Here we don't use the mannequin; it needs to be on the actual person, because you understand like even if you have a mannequin, like all the facial features underneath, they have to be sort of visible through the balaclava. So this is actually Oleg, our character supervisor. We put this on, and that's what we got. And then all the individual assets, obviously, we separate them, scan separately, and that's the result you see here. What is interesting, like I think we will talk about it later, but some of the techniques that we're using here, for instance, all the straps, they were removed because they would get scanned, but they get a bit like it's basically easier to model than later on in ZBrush or somewhere else. But anything solid, like the boots, like the kneecaps, they scan perfectly, right? The only thing you need to consider, obviously, they have to be physically correct, right? Like if a knee pad is being wrapped around something, why don't you do this on top of a on top of pants. You know, the reason why you do that, because uh, you want to make sure like those knee pads could be modular, right? They could be added or removed from a character. That's why like it's almost like, let's say you photograph something on a green screen, so you can assemble it and like put together somewhere else. This was very interesting because like actually scanning gloves is very difficult, you know, like because obviously without having a hand inside, it doesn't look real, right? Like it looks very like first the fingers have to be separated slightly so you can animate them later. But you can also like if you just stuff in stuff inside, it doesn't look right. They look too puffy, too kind of swollen. Like let's say you would think, oh, I can maybe put like pieces of cotton or something like that inside, right? And I actually struggled with this one. Essentially, I ended up scanning it on my hand, which was like really surreal because like literally like I would put it on my hand and I would move the scanner. Let's say like I have a scanner here, right? Like I would just like have a scanner like this and I would move my hand, which like with photogrammetry, it would be impossible at all. But even with scanners, it was quite challenging. But I managed to do it because like Artec also comes with a fantastic software. The scanners come with a fantastic software called Artec Studio, where like it could take all the data, which we will share later, and it could just snap it together, just like obviously I don't know the coding part of it, but it just like takes all the duplicated surface, because like when you move, essentially like your fingers would move slightly, but the software does it pretty well, and you can see it here. I mean, like this is not the cleaned up version of it. It's pretty impressive how they did it. And this is not the final one, but I did a little bit of texturing on this one. You can see like what the problem with the original scan, there's no material difference, right? Like every material, like as a diffuse, the color map is obviously correct, but there's no like roughness map, metallic features, and then you just need to separate those and do a little bit of paint work on top. But I think it's pretty good. Also, we did scan. Obviously, as a human base, we also like for our characters, we scan people. So sometimes it could be just like a head scan, or we can scan. This is my trainer actually from my gym, and I was like, dude, I need to scan it. Like he had like fantastic body proportions, and it literally like because obviously he's working as a trainer, I couldn't afford bringing him in and spending hours like scanning him. I would just I went to the gym and I just had Leo with me, and I like in 5 minutes I got this scan. But you know, here I think like I would love Mike to take over because so far what I showed you was a lot of like character work, right? Like it was props, characters, but that's mainly what we do at Big, Medium, Small. But obviously, Arctic, they have much bigger lineup of different scanners. And if possible, I would love Mike to jump in and to show us some of his magic, right?
Yeah, thank you, Jama. Thank you for your words about your experience for CGI, how you work with your scanning processing, your approach, because it's super interesting and important that you separate your model on several parts and making a scan. I think that it's pretty important to know how working with that in approach in 3D scanning. And now I want to show you for our watchers some uh, project projects that was created by Artec Studio. Oh, sorry, Artec Artec team for last maybe 2 years. Um, is this working? Do you see my screen? No? Is it work? I'm
Yes, we
sorry.
can see it.
Perfect, nice. Okay, I want to start from. I will I will show different object from props, like small object and big one objects, and we'll show advantages to combine scanner for your approach because we have a big product line, not only Arctic, but of course we'll say about Arctic Studio, how it's working inside it and which algorithms help me in my work task because I work like 3D scanner specialist here. Yeah, and the first one, how you see, it is geometry. It old radio that was found me in a old cafe in Montenegro, and for me it was interesting create excellent. Geometry with small details and making scan all these objects with Artic Leo. And also one goal that was in my mind when I start to do this, it is a realistic texture. because create great geometry and good texture with texture details like scratches, like all to save all looks from your object. It's pretty important for CGI sphere for movies and games, how you said before. And now, of course, you see that's a great color, but I want to show you another color like this, and that's looks pretty amazing from my opinion. Even these small areas with letters, I think that's tall of these letters 5 millimeters. That looks amazing. Or dust and scratches safety safe on that texture. Yes, and I think that that type of objects can be included in any type of production pipeline, but I spent just a hell of a day to create it. I scanned it by Leo and took an extra photos for photo texturing because Artec Studio has a excellent algorithm to making photorealistic texture. You just need to take a photo, and you can rotate your scan. You can make a different scan, 2, 3, 5 scan for different size of your object, and in Artec Studio you can align it, and that's working accurate. Be sure, and special algorithm global registration, making that's different size without some artifacts on geometry, and you will see in final fusion that's great geometry with small types of different old things on this radio. Yeah, I think that that's that looking for people who working like 3D artists, because efficiency and speed that's important for any types of project in our modern life. Because from my side, I can say that it is speed up my workflow like 3D artist and like 3D scanner specialist, because uh, I think that to create this texture and to create this model with manual approach, artists will spend maybe 5 days. I think this is just my opinion. Yeah, that's why it is super cool that Artec that's super flexible and easy to working scanner. It's give you opportunity to be flexible, going everywhere, and use the scanner everywhere. And next project that I want to show you, it is a helicopter. That's what's scanned by my colleague, and that's model was scanned by full size, and that's private airline in Luxembourg. Yes, that was pretty quick scan because my colleague used Artec Ray, that's our advanced laser scanner to capture a large volume object, and Artec Leo, to Artec Leo, and this was full capture of geometry, and that's pretty accuracy hard surface model. And if I will zoom in, I'm sorry, to this surface, even rivets, you can see that it's pretty nice to implement like such as some object in your some project if you wanna. That's pretty complex object, of course, and I can say that combining uh, s- data from Aleo and Red is pretty easy because we have special application for your phone to create scan with Artec Ray, and after that it's pretty speed transfer your data on your laptop and making registration between your Leo data to create model with fine details but with large volumes. It is pretty good for any type of scene that you want to create in some, I don't know, movies. Maybe you, Jama, can say something what you think about this type of object.
This is awesome. Again, like the stuff that I showed before, it's obviously like smaller scale, and seeing this, like I want to do this, you know, like it's just so cool because like giant helicopter and but you know, like from like obviously from my standpoint of you working on movies, I think this would be like very handy for sort of large scenes, you know, like let's say if you're working on a set, let's say we worked on a fictional movie, right? Like they built massive sets, And a lot of times, obviously, CGI artists will take those sets over and finish them or polish them or like remove, like replace some parts of it. And it would be very cool if they had a good base, like let's say if they would use scanners to scan the set. And then for artists, instead of starting from scratch based on the footage they have, they would get that model and enhance it further down, right? Like, so it's pretty cool. But obviously, apart from seeing it in large scale, I'm super impressed how like accurate this is, like all the rivets and stuff like that, and also like the way the surfaces looks is just super cool. Yeah, this is cool. Show us the next one. I've seen a little glimpse of this
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
before, but
I
I'm
think that
excited
next
for you
one,
guys to see
well,
this.
sorry, the next one project will be more interesting because it is a large object with texturing. This model was created by me and my colleague, and we spent just one day to capture all data. We used Artec Ray 2 and Artec Leo. And if we will change color and zoom in, you see that here a lot of small details was reconstruction from Artec data in Artec Studio. Yeah, and what inspired me that if I return texture, it is like final model for any type request that will for VFX artist or 3D artist, and for that you just need to carry your scan to your film sets or game studio where you wanna, or I don't know, parking to create interesting model for next production. Yeah, and even photo texturing. That's pretty cool algorithm. Again, I want to say it in Artec Studio to create super realistic models. Yeah, and you just need a photo camera and making extra photos to create it. And
That's awesome.
you,
And I think we
yeah,
will get the chance to show the studio a little bit. Obviously, we talked with you about this. I think we'll make a separate webinar just
good
purely
idea.
about the
Yeah,
studio and stuff like that. But like what I'm impressed by this, I did this on characters obviously, but I can see this is obviously done on the bigger scale objects, is where you don't need to make a scan in a single go, right? Like you can scan separate parts and then
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
puts it all together, which is just mind blowing because like, like for the big shapes, you can use like Leo, but anything intricate, like let's say, imagine we wanted this vehicle, uh, but then we also wanted the interior, right? Like for instance, interior, we will scan with some elements. We can even scan with Spider, and just
If you
combine
want,
everything
of
all
course.
together. It's just super
Hmm.
cool. It's basically like I love this process because it reminds me of painting. When you paint, you don't have details everywhere. You just have details where the focal point is. And let's say if this movie or a commercial or a game was like partially like in the interior of this vehicle, then we obviously refine the interior a bit better. Yeah, this is awesome. This is great.
Nice. I want to show you my final project. That's pretty massive object that was scanned by team of Artec, and maybe 4 person were included in that process. Me and three guys who captured this data because that's a massive object. That's old electricity generator from 20th century that located in Luxembourg, and originally that's object generator was without texture, but I created manually this PBR texturing to show you for everybody who's watching it now that you can play with your object because Artec Studio can give you opportunity to export it in a OBJ file with texture, with UV map, and you can play in it in a substance pattern, for example, and create or everything what you can imagine in your mind. And for example, I create this pretty realistic texture, and of course, you can see that here even wood include in that texture and scratches and the old metal, and you can use it for any type of scene in a future project for any type of, because length of that generator 25 meters and height for 15 meters, it is includes super complicated geometry to modeling it, and to create it manually. I think that you artists will spend really a lot of time. And but of course, he was capture a large volume of data, and processing time was not super faster. We spent it for processing time for that 15 days, but we use Artec Leo. If we will use just Artec Ray 2, this will more faster, but accuracy will be another, because resolution of scanner is differently. And when, for example, you're thinking about that, okay, I want to use some big object for back on my scene, or on my scene, it is not important which resolution you will be used, because it is like will stay in a background, and it's not important for players, for games, for example. But if you want to create something super realistic with fine detail, you can use and combine data from Artec Leo to create such as project. Yeah, I think that that looks interesting to 3D artists who watching us now. Thank you for attention. This was pretty interesting to show you such project from outside, like Artec team. Okay, I will stop to share my
Very much.
display.
Yeah, that
Yes.
large scale, it just blew my mind. Yeah, we exactly. It's always, but what I like about this, like you make artistic choices. Like well, like you said, you decide where this asset will be displayed in. Like is it the background asset? Is it the hero asset? But as I said, a lot of times, like I'm telling you as an artist who works on this, like most of my time, right? I would rather have a model which is not super refined, but I would have a base where I can start from, like, but then let's say if you need some foreground material, like you can spend a bit more extra time and stuff like that. That's why I think like you have different types of scanners for certain things. And it's almost like when you zoom in, you kind of going from Ray towards like Leo, then you can use Eva, and then you can use Spider. And for instance, I have Spider and Eva and Leo as well. So whenever I look at the project, I decide accordingly, right? Like, okay, this is a project where I can start with Leo or Eva, and then I can like insert parts of it, which would be scanned with Spider. But what happens after you scan things? Let's talk about that. I have a few examples here. I'll share those with you. So let's go back to our presentation. Can you guys see it? Hopefully you do. Okay. So we left it here, but I wanted to show you a few examples. Obviously, when you scan something, it's like super high poly. Like if you look at this image, like you see here the material, and you can see all these little like imperfections and stuff like that. It's a very solid base, right? And again, like literally this took around like 5 minutes. This is like super quick. You just put this object on a turntable. But there are a few tips that I figured out. This is it gets very interesting. Like initially, I didn't know that like what color range is better to use for scanners, and obviously something around this sort of value is good. It's less about the color itself, but it's more about the value, because like the darker the value is, I don't know obviously how scanners work precisely, but I would imagine there's some sort of a grid projected on the surface, right? And if the surface is too dark, obviously the grid is kind of less visible. So this sort of any whiter is also a problem. Let's say like if you have a sunny day and you have like a very bright surface, then the grid also blends with the background. So essentially like by trial and error, I figured out this is the best color. But this doesn't, as you, Mike, said, it doesn't restrict you artistically, because I believe like all we need is just the basic like geometry information, because then the texture and all that stuff, we will have tons of artistic choices that we can make later on. And I will show you the final result, and you will see what I mean. So once we scan it, obviously the artists, they use their talent to retopo this, right? Because any game or film asset, most of the time it needs to be reduced in polygons. Obviously, if it's going to be animated, you need to fix the topology and stuff like that. So this is where artists take over. And then they do their magic, right? So one of our brilliant artists here at Big Medium Small, she took this asset, she obviously retopologized everything, and then you need to unwrap it as well. This was done, and then you put this into Substance Designer or Substance Painter, and then you paint the textures. So this is how it looks with the textures painted, and that's what I was talking about. The original asset obviously was sort of this mid to sort of sepia color, mid-value sepia color, but you can see like after we get the scans, after it goes through the artist's talent, you can create different designs. You can start like playing with the storytelling. Essentially, that's the ultimate thing that we do in games or films. And I can show you the final render. You can see like this is just super nice. Yeah, like even every time I see this, I go like, oh wow, it went from like this like the sort of the real product, and then it got scanned, and then it got tweaked, and you see like the artist was able to paint the roughness and to make it look like it's a sort of special operation boots, you know. I have a few more examples here. Like again, sometimes obviously with boots you don't need anything inside. You know, most of the time you can just scan them as it is. But then sometimes like I would scan them on top of a mannequin or a real person. You can see the vest here was scanned, and then it went through this ZBrush process when artists clean it up. Obviously replace all the small elements, and then separate the assets. Then it goes through retopo, and this is the final product. You can see like, yeah, you can just tell like how much we kept of the original sort of design, you know, and details and all those things. But obviously, there's quite a lot of talent involved in this one. Some like again like the boots previously, the knee pads that we showed, the pants, and it's all like coming together. Again, this is sort of like to show the lineup. We do the retopo. So this is actually already the low poly model. So essentially, this is how it looks when we scan it, more or less. But underneath it, you obviously do the standard process, right? Like you retopologize it, make sure that we have lower poly count, and then you bake the normals. So essentially, once you do all those steps with the materials, it looks like this. And yeah, here goes the sort of final look of it. This is where we kind of assembled everything together, and I can show you like a few renders here. So yeah, you can see like everything. Obviously, as I mentioned, not everything is scanned, because like as an artist, you know exactly sort of what are pros and cons. Like for instance, like you can scan the helmet, but I found the problem with helmet, the design we want like a specific look of it. So a lot of times we basically, like I would say most of the time, are design driven, you know, like we don't want just like to recreate what already exists, but we want to give it like our artistic license, you know. And that's why like we would consciously say like, hey, some of the props we can scan them and tweak, or some of them we can like model them from scratch. For instance, the radio here was modeled because like we don't want, like a lot of times you also don't want to mess with the copyright issues. So like some of the generic assets, you can scan them and use them, but something custom, you should definitely make it from scratch. And that's exactly what we did here. And yeah, I'm very happy about this. You can see like there's a lot of like, and then obviously you can, once you scan certain elements, you can, with the texturing and all those things, you can add additional like dirt pass and just basically make it more realistic and stuff. So this is where we are at with this product. But now I also wanted to go into sort of technical aspect of it. So I'll show you a few, like this is obviously how it looks in Artec Studio. Let me just open the elbow pad for you. Yeah, so when you scan things, obviously initially you're scanning this point cloud. I might talk in some technical things because I'm just a user, but basically when you scan something, like you can see here, like it's getting scanned, and sometimes like you don't need to scan it in one go. That's what I talked about. You see like over here, I've got two scans, like they pretty much overlap, right? But why do I do that? For instance, I scan it once, and then I decided like, oh, you know what, like I'm missing some areas and some parts. I can do additional scan. And like, again, we meant to do a separate webinar on this, but basically like Artec Studio is so good at like combining different scans, you know, like for instance, you can take several parts and like snap them together. Then you can use like this registration mode where like you can see a lot of like, sometimes what would happen, there would be like elements floating around, which also like snap together when you run it through registration, because like the way this operates, it knows like if you can define how far the points are offset and all those things. There's like tons of things. That's why we need another session on this, but that's mainly the process. And once you do that, you fuse them together, which is here called the smart fusion, right? So you basically like have different settings where you can define how heavy it's gonna be, like, but a lot of times like I don't go super heavy, like because this is like a relatively small asset. So we've got 3 million polygons here. And again, one of the things to keep in mind here, you want your asset or whatever you're scanning to be physically sort of correct according to where it's going to be used, right? If it's a knee pad or like a shoulder pad or like an elbow pad, obviously in case of an elbow pad, it has to be wrapped around the hand, right? But then ideally you don't want it to be so narrow. That's why like here, I think this is like a waste basket that I had in my office. So I just like wrapped it around the waste basket just because I wanted like to make sure I have a creative space, like freedom in case if I wanted to be less curved or more curved, at least some curving had to occur. That's why I have it like this. And once you do that, obviously, let me see what else do I have here. Yeah, this is the knee pad, again, using the same technique. You see, I'm not capturing the straps. As I mentioned before, the straps, it's not like they scan pretty well, but because they have to be separated on the other side, it's usually better if you just not scan them and then like in ZBrush add them, because usually you would have a lot of like straps from previous projects. Like all we actually need is this area, right? So, and then when we fuse them together, you can see it's like really nice. And again, you see over here, you see some holes here. You can either use it as it is, but a lot of times you can also like use the software to close the holes. And essentially like as geometry, like if you go just to scan, like Studio is pretty good at doing that. Like it's not perfect, obviously it has a bit of errors here and there, but overall, like this is like super solid place to start, because like you can see like there's just a little bit of stuff that is missing, which is later on it has to be refined. But overall, this asset could be just straight away given, could be given to an artist. They will do the retopo, the texturing and stuff like that, and it would work. But I also wanted to show you the actual process. So like I have this elbow pad here, which is basically like I exported it from Artec Studio and put it in here. So what happens next, right? Like obviously, how do you clean this stuff up? Again, artists use different softwares, but I use 3D Code just because it's using voxels. For instance, I don't know the technique in ZBrush, how you would do that. I'm pretty sure it's kind of similar. But in 3D Code, basically the way it works, like because 3D Code has a voxel-based sort of technology, essentially what it means when, like I have this tool called box hide here. So when you hide something, because like ideally what we want to do is separate this, right? Like, so we've got this waste basket, obviously. We want to cut it out and make sure our asset is isolated. What you can do, you can hide certain elements, but then you go, oh my God, I deleted part of it. I know I told you not to be bothered about this straps here, but let's say we want it, right? The way this works, like, is super smart. So Vox hide and 3D Code is basically like if you ever use Photoshop, right? In Photoshop, you have a mask, right? Like you create a mask and you erase in or erase out the mask. Same here, but this time around, instead of working with like flat image, it works as in a 3D model, on a 3D model. So essentially, if I press Control, I can bring back some of it. And you can see, like, I don't need to be super precious about this, because at any point, I can bring back a lot of this, you know. And it also depending on the angle as well, because like I can pretty much like rotate my camera, you know, like this, and then I can slowly, like, yeah, with Control, it brings it back. And again, you can change the mode. Like, let's say, obviously, right now we're doing in the free lasso mode. You can also get a little bit of and like polygon lasso as well, right? And then it's way more precise. So basically, like you can just go and start deleting it. I love it. I like most of the time, if I have to clean up scans, I do it in 3D Code, because, like I said, with the Control pressed, you can bring back some of the elements. You see, like when I do that, some of that information is coming back. And essentially, like, you are not worried about like messing up your model, right? Like it's already pretty good that you can do this. But if there are any places where you mess it up, you can bring it back like this. So let's say, like, for some reason, like I did this, right? And you don't panic, basically. With the Control, you can just bring it back. So voxels are fantastic. And obviously, this is not a textured model, but actually you can bring in textured model and pretty much do the same, you know, like you can just separate it, separate this model as it is. Yeah, so that's how I would like delete the unnecessary parts. But also sometimes what would happen, you would have, like, let's say if I have this pants over here, right? Obviously, we already know, like, the top part, right? Like, we can just delete it, right? Like this. And then using Vox height and stuff. But also, like, let's say I've got the boots right here. And let's say if I wanted to separate the boots from the pants, but I wanted to keep those. So essentially what you can do, like, there are a few ways you can do it. You can either like split it, like there is a split tool where you can do the same and it gets splitted, or you can actually like Vox hide it, because again, I think this will be pretty straightforward because it's just, but still you will have some areas where you want like, yeah, like for instance, this area, you see, like I want from a different angle to hide a bit more, right? And then we want whatever was separated, we want it kind of back, but as a separate object. So what we would do, we would say like separate hidden volumes. And you see now that asset came in as a separate asset, which is just amazing, because a lot of times what would happen, like let's say we created this asset, but then later on someone decided to, what do you call it, to separate the knee pads, right? So we can essentially do what we did before, right? Like we can go ahead and like start separating it. So I think we should do it the other way around. So let's say we can do it like this. So like just from this camera view, we can separate this part, right? And then I will rotate my camera and continue with this one. I don't think I will spend. I don't think I need to do the whole thing, but I think you will get the point. So let me just quickly do this very quickly. Yeah, you see, like, because I'm hiding this model from different angles, I pretty much can do this for the whole thing. And do a little bit here. So it's not perfect, but I think you guys got the point. So, and like for instance, obviously all the back stuff got disappeared as well, but you know, with control we can bring back that stuff, right? So we can just do that. Yeah, so it looks like, and then maybe we should separate this part, right? So it looks like the knee pad was sort of isolated and separated, right? And then all we need, obviously, if you're doing this properly, you'll like make sure like it's like much nicer inside. And then, yeah, you do the same thing. You go ahead and then you can either delete the hidden, sometimes you want that, but in this case, obviously, we just want to bring that back, right? So boom, and when we do that, you see the knee pad came in as different geometry, and now you can move it, and now you can basically like clean up the knee pad, make it as a separate asset. So you might ask like, well, you have a giant hole here. Obviously, sometimes like you obviously need to sculpt it up. Like for instance, if I want to restore this, then obviously I'll have to sculpt it up. So which is also doable, you know, like we can start like, you know, just inflating this area and then basically like closing the gap and stuff like that. But obviously, if this was a separate asset, you don't need to do that, right? But in this case, we decided to do it this way, right? So I can do it like this, and from here, it's basically there are no cheats. It's just basically being a sculptor or an artist, you will start like refining these areas, you know, like introducing sort of the fabric, the folds, and all that stuff. So. Obviously, this takes way more than 10 minutes, so I'll skip that part. But at least, like, for now, we have two separate objects, right? Like, we have the knee pad, and once we do kind of refine everything, we can snap it back, and it will look nicer. So when you're creating a character, you're giving your, like, users, so people who would purchase this model, ability to, like, toggle this on and off. But the scan overall, that's what we talked about. It gives you, like, fantastic solid base, you know, like, can I sculpt this from scratch? Possibly, but it's not, the point is not that, you know, like I would love to make sure I have something that is a very solid base to start from, you know, like I can take this one and I can keep refining it and doing all those things. Yeah, that's pretty much how it works, you know, but you can see the scans are really, like this is the original scan just imported. It's pretty clean. Like sometimes you would get like, yeah, like for instance here, you see there's, oh, that's where I cut it, right? Like, so it's all good. It was actually me who messed it up, so not the original scan. But let me see what's the other example. No, this is the examples I have so far. And you can see after you do this, and obviously artists will take this over, the scan is just the starting point. That's how it speeds up the initial step, where we basically like taking something existing, scanning it, putting it into artistic pipeline, then we clean it up, then do retopo and do all the magic that artists do. And we ended up having something really cool. All right, I think this is it, guys, from me. And if you have any questions, me and Mike, we are happy to answer them.
I want to add some words to your speech,
Yeah,
Jama.
go
I
ahead.
think that I found good thing that 3D scanners, it is like your personal 3D artist because it's helped you a lot. You create it from scratch, yes, you can, but your 3D scanner can create it perfectly with physical correctly size. It is really important for creation some assets. I totally agree with you. Just like think about that it is like 3D artist for you, your 3D scanner.
Yeah, it's a tool that helps you, just like any tool, like that you use on a daily basis. It's just another tool that gives you a lot of creative freedom, and yeah, I'm like every time I do experiment with different things, and it's just like mind blowing with what you can achieve basically.
Oh, hair scanning tips. Good question. Of course, in a modern approach for creation hair, you need to do this with a special way. Now I know two different approach. It is hair cards or alembic hair for next using for pipeline for Unreal Engine. But if you wanna making just 3D scan, you can making a bit wet your hair on your actor whom you will scan, and maybe you can use some powder for hair to, because melanin, it is super complicated surface to make and scan, but if you will mate it, it is will be more easy to capture data from them.
Yeah, I can give you a couple of tips. I think I gave up on hair in general. So, but as I said, like dark hair is almost impossible. Like you gotta something to. You can do what I do. You can go gray, but this happened to me ages ago. So, yeah, obviously hair is difficult. But the question is like, what would you use it for? That's why, like, I'm saying I sort of gave it up because like you cannot get the quality that you can use in a game anyway, right? Like, so the hair will be replaced. So it's gonna be either like you do it like with little stripes and stuff like that. So stripes. So it's, but if you want to get a general shape, just like Mike said, like it's better to put them together, like, and they has, because like whenever hair is also very fuzzy, like it's a lot of noise. Apart from being like dark, it also like very fussy, and like there's a lot of like little noise, and the scanner kind of gets the hair. But in general, like a lot of times I would just know like, hey, I just need a generic shape, right? It's going to be replaced anyway. So like I personally, I don't bother too much about hair. Shall we just go through the questions? There's a lot of questions actually, right? Philip is asking. Felipe is asking what materials and surfaces are most difficult to scan. Again, we talked about the color, right? It's like anything super dark and matte as well, like is quite tricky, right? Uh, and also super bright materials. And obviously, like depending on the lighting, like let's say if you have direct sunlight hitting the object, it would be quite challenging. So I think like lighting wise, it's nicer to have like some sort of overcast, but this is not something you have to have, like you, like even with sunlight, it does, the scanners do pretty good job, like, so with materials, obviously like chrome materials would be very difficult, like super reflective. But again, like these scanners are pretty forgiving. Anything like in between, like semi matte, like roughness, like which has a bit of roughness, they scan it pretty well, right? Translucent materials are not super good, especially like if it's like a plastic, super transparent. Like, so the rougher the material is, it scans it better. But and it's trial and error. The good news about doing this, you see it straight away. Like, apart from like with photogrammetry, like you first take the photos, then you process them, right? Like, until you process them, you don't know if they're gonna get scanned or not, right? Like, let's say you had a vehicle and then certain areas of it were transparent or super reflective. You only will know that once you finish the scan and you come home and you start processing your material, right? But with scanners, that's why, like, it's the learning process is much faster. As I told you, I started with a Dyson fan and my butt naked mannequin Rob. But then later on, I was like quickly figured out, okay, actually I need a full-on 3D turntable. Then I bought like this massive industrial turntable. And then I also learned, because like for instance with Leo, it's fantastic because you don't need to hold your laptop, because it scans, and as it scans, like, you can see the preview on your little monitor over here, and the monitor also moves as well. Like, for instance, you can scan by looking at the monitor, or you can rotate it. It's like super cool. But with the Spider, for instance, you have to have it connected to your laptop, uh, and then you need to hold your laptop. And what happens if you hold your laptop and you hold your scanner? I don't have a third hand, so I can't move the turntable, right? So I essentially bought a turntable which has a remote control. So basically, like, at least, like, if you put down the laptop, you can like play pause or like play on the turntable. So but you learn it very fast. There's no process of like first photos and then comes the result. You see it here. Like, for instance, on Leo, you can see it on the preview, right? Like, which is obviously not working right now, but you see it over here. With, what do you call it? With Spider, you see it on the laptop, so you have direct preview, so you experiment much faster. Like, I would, like, on the Japanese product that I showed you, so it's sort of Japanese inspired collection that we did at Big Medium Small. You like we were planning to introduce some like sort of a grocery stuff, like the sort of the noodle packs and stuff like that. So when I was doing that, I realized like transparent surfaces are not so well scanned, but then obviously you can spray them with the matte paint and stuff like that. So I would say the learning curve and sort of understanding certain things comes much faster with the scanners. Then you know like your limits, what scans better, what type of lighting you need, and all those kind of things.
Yeah, I totally
All
agree with
right.
you, Jama. And I want to add some words about techniques. You said about sprays. Yeah, that's a good option. Powders, that's good option because has sprays with long-lasting effects to matte something. No, tinting sprays, something, and quick evaporating sprays that no trace on surface after that's using the spray. Yeah, and also one technique that I want to share, that if you want to make and capture texture from your future models, from something shiny or transparent, first of all, you need to create first scan to capture texture frame. And after that, you can use a Tantic spray to capture good resolution of your data. And in the final fusion, you will use not only your data from spraying mesh, model, you will use for texture frame for first scan. It is like trick. You use one data for fusion and use another data without spray for your texturing, and in final you will have fusion with good texture, like
Yeah.
tricks.
I think, Misha, what we do, Mike, what we should do next time around, we need to show all this stuff, because right now we're just like explaining in this abstract sort of
You're
way.
right.
But yeah, we're gonna do a second round. I want to do the second round because there's so much to talk about, like the technical aspect of it. So it would be great to talk about this. I think like there was another very good question. If you can just guys put it on the screen.
Mhm.
Yes. So all right. So you looking for deeper dive
May
into
I answer for this
this?
question because it is from
Yes. Yes.
Artec
Sure.
sites, Jama, and
Yes. Yes.
I
Please.
want to say that we have special platform Artec Academy, such contain a lot of different materials, and also please watch our YouTube channel, because there has different webinars with topics with photo texturing, how you can work with 3D scanners to create fusion. Just write email on support Artec 3D to ask some question about Artec Academy, and we will share some information about this.
Awesome. Well, I did not have that academy when I was learning this, so I don't know how we're gonna catch up with that. All right. So yeah, so this is a good one. You see the question there. So what happens like if you scan a large object? So obviously I did this on a smaller scale, but with those soldier designs that I showed you, you pretty much like use like for instance, you use a lower resolution scanner to scan the whole thing. Like I would use EVA, which has lower resolution, but it's so much faster because like the angle that it captures is just like really really impressive, you know. So essentially like you can like in 2 minutes scan the whole person, right? But then obviously it's, remember we talked about the focal points. So essentially like in any object you would have areas that have to be refined more or less better than the others. So I would then pick up a different scanner and I would just scan that area. Obviously that would be a separate scan, right? So how do you combine them together? So this is something I think, Mike, we should cover in the next one. In the studio, in Artec studio, like you basically pretty much like tell, okay, this point, because in the lower preview of this, let's say like I've got this like model over here, right? Like let's say we scan this with the lower resolution scanner, and then for instance all the like little turrets, they were scanned with the higher resolution scanner. Then you take those scans, and inside studio you basically like create points telling like, oh, this point should go to this one and this one. You need basically 4 points, and it just snaps it perfectly. This was like magic for me when I first tried it, you know. So yeah, essentially like you have a freedom to scan stuff separately. And I think even like, let's say in your case, obviously you were talking about large monument. I think in your case, like for instance, let's say if I'm working on a character design, obviously I have an actor or like uh, a, a, even a mannequin that I have to move around slightly, and you know when you move it, the folds could change and stuff like that. But with the large monument, it doesn't move, you know, as far as I know, right? Like they don't move like a big buildings. So essentially, let's say you scan it in one go, and next day you realize, oh my god, like there's a part that is not like high res enough, or you need to rescan it. You can go there once again, you know, scan that little or like that specific part, come back, and then combine those scans together, and it just works very nicely. I think we just replied to this one. It's a very similar one, right? Do we? Yeah, let's just go for the next one. Yeah, we use 3D code. Yeah, like again, it's artistic preference. Like some people love doing this in Blender, Maya, 3ds Max, or whatever. But like personally, I myself find 3D code retopo tools are like the most convenient, you know. And some of the artists in our team use that as well. But some of the artists I know they use Maya as well. So again, like what we did talk about with the first step about scanners, like from there, it depends on how artists want to tackle this, right? Once they get a very solid base material, they use whatever tools they prefer to take it to the next step. And in terms of obviously by hand or is it like automated process, it depends on the project, you know, like let's say, I would imagine like if you have a monument that you scanned, right? I don't think you need to retopo it by hand because you can just decimate it and use some like auto retopo tools. But obviously, if it has to be animated, like in the case of those soldiers, right? They had to have proper topology, right? So you obviously have to go and do certain things by hand. This is why I wanted like some AI retopo tools. You know, guys, if any of you are good at coding and AI, I would love to have AI doing all the retopo stuff, you know. But unfortunately, a lot of times you need to go and do it by hand.
Everybody on it.
Yeah, I think this is your call, Mike, with the photo remapping.
Um, for our system, we're using such approach. We created first of all Fusion with Artec Leo, and add after that and registration photo to create it. It is our system. Or but you question photo remapping. It is like rebaking. What does it mean?
No,
Because
no. I think what they mean is you know how the original scan has some texture information, but it's not exactly high res. So you know how in the studio you can do like photo. I forgot what it is called. Like when you take photos as well, and then you can project them back on the model. You
photo
actually did
texture.
that you did that with your truck, right?
Mhm.
So that's something I think that they were asking about. Yeah.
For it is um, first of all that you should um, remember when you're working with people, it is that if your person will move, this will be complicated to register registration photo from your camera to your scan because it is will misalign between it. That's why, of course, in that setup you need to control your person and actor to create it. It's possible, but you should remember about that, control your person and making super fast the photo, because if you actor will move, when photo registration will be with mistakes and with small artifacts. You can edit these artifacts on Substance Painter or 3D Code where you want to, but first thing, when you will be start making photo texturing for person heads or body, remember that making it faster. Make it faster scan, make faster photo.
Yeah, but I think can you guys see my screen? Yes, like a lot of times the texture that comes with the scan is actually pretty good. You know, like especially like since we're talking about the head scan, I don't think you need to have additional like photo projection pass on top, because you can see like this one, and when you do the texture part, you know, when you go here, you can like define the resolution, and 8K is actually pretty good, you know. It could potentially get a bit like blurry in some areas, but again, this is where the art, like you can see it here, for instance, like here it's much sharper, and here it gets a bit blurry. But again, like it depends on what you, if this like pouch was like this far on the character, right? Like depending on the scale of it, I don't think a lot of times you actually need a different technique to project the materials on, but you can do that. I know that. But a lot of times what I do, I basically run it through the fusion process, and then I add texture on top. Like on big models, it sometimes takes some time, but usually I would just like run it and do something else, and in an hour or two, it will finish the whole process. And then you can export this as OBJ, and then you still like the thing with textures, you will have to paint, you will have to do additional pass with painting, because when you do it here, it's all just one color map. You see there's no roughness, for instance, like let's say, yeah, like obviously this part is metallic, right? This part is plastic, but at least for now, I don't know what type of stuff Artec is working on, but I'm pretty sure that in the future, maybe it will be possible to get different material passes. But for now, since you only have color pass, then you just need to paint. So essentially, like this texture, it's a base for you, right? You take this one, you can use it for color, but anything else has to be painted, like all the roughness material, like different materials and stuff like that. You saw this perfectly on the boots, right? Like if I can go back to boots, where are they? Yeah, over here. You see, like original scan, that's pretty much what we see here, right? There's no sort of variation in roughness or metallicness, right? But when we actually give it to the artist, they do their magic, you know, and you can see here, like it's just so impressive how they were like able to add some leaks, some dirt, you know, it's almost, and you know, with this, but it was like super interesting because previously we did a few products where we had to put a lot of dirt on the boots, but when we started doing military, like I've never been to military, but I've seen videos where they are super strict about how clean your shoes or boots have to be. So we essentially have to put this sort of like a material so it looks like they polish it every day, you know, like, and that's why like we added a little bit of like much more specular sort of features, because essentially in military we wanted to show that they are kind of taking care of their shoes and stuff like that. But again, like if you go back and compare this with the original scan had none of this, you know. But that's what makes it super exciting, you know. We're not just copying what we see, we actually taking our artistic license, you know. Yeah. Mike, I will let you take this one. I don't want to get into holy wars between different softwares, right? So I personally use Pretty Code because I like it, but I'm pretty sure ZBrush is awesome. You can
It's
get a
like
lot
with
of
car. I don't know how I can explain it in other words, because somebody start with 3D Code, somebody start with Blender, somebody start with ZBrush, and everybody tried to explain that my software is better than you. I think that it is really not important which software you will be used, because important how you understand what you want to do. And if you will study, I don't know, Blender, you will create model in a Blender. Yeah, like you, Jama, you start with 3D code, you know everything what you want to do, and your model will create super cool and it looks amazing. Like in my experience in ZBrush, it just depends on from which step you will start,
Yeah.
which program you start to study.
Yeah, but I think there was a practical question as well, like what is the process not to lose details? I think we need to go
If
back to
about
this.
this,
Yeah,
mhm.
we need to go back to this when we do the second part, because like, you know, like I think like it would be nice to show a bit more of the process, you know. And I actually totally understand what they mean,
Yeah,
so
mhm.
we should cover this next time around, hopefully.
Yeah, Dynamesh function for ZBrush, it is to remake your topology, and of course, with that you will be lose your detail. But for what you want to do this, for example, if you will use Fusion from Artec Studio, that's pretty a lot of polygons. It's compatible for making some editing in ZBrush with brushing, everything what you wanna. 5 millions, it is already enough to create something. Yeah, but if you create Dynamesh, if you use Dynamesh, you can use function if projection. You choose your old scan, your old model and your new model from Dynamesh, and it is like a projection from your new model from old model, like copy. Function project.
Great. It's Marmoset, right?
Yeah, about my example, yes, it's a render system marmoset that I use for making maps and making renders. But in a Blender, you have same option to making maps and making renders, Unreal Engine, wherever. But from my experience, marmoset too easy to create some scenes, to making lightning, and it's a GPU render that work with NVIDIA, that is such as faster and speed up your render. Yeah, the marmoset toolback.
I
Advertisement.
just posted, I just posted the name in the chat so they can check it out.
Well, you mean point clouds from different scanners or from what? Usually when I work with point clouds, for example, it's like data from Leo or Spider. I have different this data sets between each other and making fusion directly without some separating on different type of fusion from Spider, fusion from Leo. No, I'm combining it in one data set
Uh,
and making
Yeah,
fusion.
Mike, I think the question is like, do you? That's actually interesting because I also don't know which is the best way, or can you even do that? So basically, Diana is asking like, do you combine when you have the point cloud, or do you do
Oh,
that after the fusion? You know?
point cloud, it means that from different scanners, mm, we have two type of steps to create before fusion. You need to align your point cloud. If you even have point cloud for one Artec ray and second point cloud from another scanner, you need to combine it. But now Artec Studio work just point cloud from Artec ray and Artec 2, and that's why you need to use just this point cloud for
But
creation next fusion.
can you actually combine the fusions? Like, like for instance, you
If you
have.
want to combine fusion, you can combine it fusion, but I think that better approach to create fusion directly from your point cloud, because when you will use, for example, two fusions and making next fusion from them, you will lose some resolution. It
Yeah,
can be.
yeah.
I
Cool.
hope that I answer for this question.
All right.
Okay.
Seems like Mike is tired. So is it
No,
time to wrap it up?
not that. No,
Well,
no.
this is cool, guys. Thanks a lot for your time. I know like there's been a lot to go through, but hopefully
Automotive,
we'll
it
make
mean
a
the car or
What's that?
what? Diana mean that automotive it is like car, making 3D scanning of car, or automotive like I don't know, robot hand for Artec or not clear question for me. Maybe you
I
understand
think like
better.
yeah, Diana is asking like with Arctic Leo, we showed the helicopter that we did, but
Car.
I
Yeah,
also
she.
it's interesting. I would
Yeah.
love to know this as well because you also have like markers which I never tried. I don't know if it's what is it
I
for and
can
stuff.
explain.
Last
I
time,
can explain how it's
yeah,
working.
last time someone explained me, but I don't have I had brain capacity to understand that. So if you can elaborate, that would be great.
If you want to work with a big project and main complicated when you're working with cars, helicopter, that you have no rich texture detail surface. That's why keep tracking on your scanner. It is a bit complicated. That's why you need to add some, I don't know, markers or texture features. I mean that it can be not only markers. You can painting something on papers. Doesn't matter, but you need to add some. If you just have just a red surface, you need to add some texture features to, and it will be help you to making registration in the future steps of processing of your data. That's why if your scanner don't understand, if you capture data from, I don't know, door and another door and that same color, not a lot of geometry features, it's really complicated for our system to find and registration this data between each other. That's why we try to help them. I mean, that scanner and application with this complicated surface, because sunshine, transparent, yes, this complicated surface, but surface with one color and without some geometric features, it's complicated too for any scanners, not only for Artec 3D. But Artec 3D working good because we can just drawing something on a paper and glue it on a surface, and that will be work better.
Awesome.
I think that, yeah, awesome, nice.
All right, guys, thank you so much, and we will see you the next time around. There's so much to go through. Hopefully, I get invited one more time. I didn't say anything bad this time around, so hopefully they will get me back and we do another round with you, Mike. So it would be nice to have some like insights into the studio because it has so many features. And again, like for me, it was super easy to learn, but I know like we can shorten that process for people who are attending these webinars, to give them a bit more sort of like much more denser information, but we need to give them examples. That's why like I felt today some of the questions we actually had to show something, so hopefully we'll do it next time around. Awesome, guys.
You're
Thank you
right.
very much and have a good evening. Bye bye.
Have a good evening. Bye bye.